Thank you very much, and thanks, Christina, for having me. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be with my fellow panelists to talk about something that's important and essential as you travel from Latin American countries to the Pacific, in particular in China. Can you go back one more? And so I wanted to say this particular training, titled Social Cultural Aspects of Doing Business in China, I've given this talk or training presentation at various lengths. I've done it for 3 days, I've done it for 2 hours, and now you're going to get the best version, which is 12 minutes, okay? All right, so bear with me. I'm going to start by saying something that hopefully some of you know. Ni hao. All right, good, very good. So if you don't know, you should know, which means hello and greetings in Chinese. And so you could tell people that you've learned how to speak Chinese, at least that little phrase, from the voice of Rosetta Stone's Mandarin products. So say that with me again. Ni hao. Ni hao. So Manny, that earlier question from you was a setup, was a rhetorical question. Of course, Mandarin is the most spoken language in the whole world, right? Okay. I just had to throw that at you. All right. Well, there are many things essential, but let me peel off the onion a little bit to give you something that are absolutely the most important things as you travel to the Pacific and to China, my home country. We're going to do a quick overview, and of course I will give you some do's and don'ts as you go to a place. Earlier that you talked about the fears. One of my clients in his early stages of going to China, he said, going to China was like being blindfolded walking into a minefield. Well, he was a little bit exaggerating, but I think the sentiment is still relevant, right? Okay, so you need someone to guide you through the mine. Don't be blindfolded, but then you also need to understand what's good, what's not good, and what should be said and what should be done. 关系, that's a Chinese word. 关系. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Saving face, gift giving, and of course the most important thing is to establish rapport with your Chinese counterpart, whether you do business in China or you're doing business with China while you're on this continent. Okay, next page. So some of the details we're going to review today include the following: individualism versus group-centeredness, Confucianism. That's at the core of the culture. So you got to understand a little bit of that. And saving face, I mentioned earlier, that's 面子 in the Chinese language. Personal connections. Manny, you also talked about the know who. I think it works the same thing in Asia and China, but it's a little bit different than just knowing who. It's the personal connections, 关系. Once we talk about the 面子 and the 关系, the next most important step is understanding the intermediary. We call them 中间人, all right? And of course, you also have to be a study of 社会等级, which is social status. Very important. I can't stress how important that is in the Chinese culture. And the last one is reciprocity, 回报, reciprocity, and privacy issues. So let's peel off one at a time. One more. I don't have a clicker with me, but I'll rely on you. In the Western culture, in particularly here in America, we focus more on personal achievement, creativity, and initiative, where in China, it's all about group process. You follow the party line. You toe the line. If your leader, your manager says, let's walk this way, do not deviate. Do not get out of the line. You follow that line, all right? It's all about consensus. We build consensus. So nobody is willing to come out and say, well, I think something along the line of a little bit different from what just being said by your leader, by your manager. So I've seen a dynamic here in this country where I've been for the past 23 years, where an intern in an organization could just get up and speak his mind or her mind at a staff meeting. You've seen that, right? So it's okay for the interns to speak up. It's not okay at all in China, in that society where you're at the very bottom of the totem pole. How dare you to speak up and to voice your opinions that could be different from the rest of the group or the leader for that matter. So it's all about the harmony, to achieve the harmony. So keep that in mind, and let's just do the comparison. In the Western culture, what do we say here? The squeaky wheel, what? Gets the grease. So you have to be the squeaky wheel. How do you get to be the squeaky wheel? Make a lot of noise? Speak up? Complain, all right? Okay, what else? How do you do? How do you become a squeaky wheel? Yeah, you gotta make some kind of noises. You gotta let people know this is what you want, this is what you want to get. So eventually you get the grease. Well, in China and the rest of the Asian countries, most of the Asian countries, we have a saying that goes something like that. The nail that sticks out. Did I get your attention or what? The nail sticks out, gets hammered down. So you don't speak up, okay? Keep the harmony. So be careful as you travel to China and work with your Chinese counterpart. Okay, next page. Yeah. Let's do a quick comparison of how we differ in cultural values and ways of thinking. Americans, how do we think? We think we're individualist. It's all about me. I go to certain school, I pursue a certain career, I choose to drive certain car, I choose to wear this versus that. You know, it's all about me, right? Exactly. The Chinese, we're more like collectivist. And information oriented, that's American. Relationship oriented, that's Chinese. So you see the comparison. Sequential. Americans pay attention to go from A to Z. So how do we get from A to Z? You have a process. The Chinese, circular. Have you ever worked with the Chinese people? They beat around the bushes. You never get to the bottom. Okay. All right, good. I got some colleagues here nodding the head. Okay. So we beat around the bushes. It's not that we don't want to give you an answer. It's just the way we are, the cultural value, okay? The way of we were brought up, and the way our parents and our grandparents, our forefathers were brought up. It's ingrained in us. We're not trying to be vague. It's just the way we are. That's how we are made. The Chinese seeks the way. We're going to find a way to get there. The American seeks the truth. Got to find the absolute truth. All right? Americans tend to argue. All right? So in the last couple of days, we've seen what's happening between the Hill and the White House. You argue back and forth, okay? The Chinese like to haggle. Have you all been to a Chinese market and you haggle over that one piece of something, clothing? It could be just 10 yuan, which probably is like $1.50 or 50 cents for that matter. We just have to haggle. It's a ritual of going back and forth. So Americans just give up, say, oh, I don't want to deal with you. But you may have just lost a customer. That's how they're operating. That's just how they want to do. All right? Yes, be aware. Going to the women's conference. Yes. So the Americans are about egalitarian. The Chinese is all about hierarchical. Again, you got the orders, the leader, the sub-leader, the assistant leader, the deputy assistant leader. Everybody is in the right line. Okay, we're talking about federal government here for a second, right? All right, next page. The negotiation styles and the process are also very different. We have profound differences. So the Americans were informal. This young lady sitting next to me earlier asking me about the cultural differences. I said, you know, a lot of the things I've seen in Americans, my clients, when we travel to China, I take them there. And these are seasoned international travelers. And they go to China, they meet so-and-so, they want to behave the way they behave back home. It's like Kansas. Nobody's here from Kansas, right? All right, okay, just Kansas for the sake of the movie, all right? When you're in Kansas, you pat somebody in the back, hey, Joe, a big slap on the back. And when you do that in China, okay, no. It's a big no-no. Because what? Because that's not how people behave. They do not want to deviate anything that's out of the norm from their behaviors. Here comes the good old American thinking he's being friendly, being nice and kind and super outgoing. No, it's not perceived well. So it's not what you think you're doing that's good for you and them. You gotta think hard. You gotta take a step back, do your homework. What is being accepted in China before you do the slap on the back with your Chinese Mr. Wang, Mr. Zhou, Mr. Chen, or Ms. whoever, okay? Americans are very informal. The Chinese are very formal. Here we call, Christina. Somebody earlier addressed you as Mrs. Caballero. In China, they address you by your formal titles, either your Director, President Caballero, Mr. Ginsburg, Ms. Rivera. It's all about your title, and rarely you go off on first name basis. Rarely, especially in business. So don't think you know this guy for 3 times, you've met him 4 times for dinner and drink, you could start going off on first name basis. That may not go very well. Okay? Even though Americans like to do that. Make cold calls. We'll pick up the phone and say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm Dottie Lee from Trans-Pacific Communications. Ms. Caballero recommend that I speak with you." That person takes a call. "Oh, yeah, friend of Ms. Caballero's." Okay? In my earlier career, I'll tell you a quick story. I was working at a big name PR agency back then, and we had a conference of some sort. I needed to reach out to the Chinese consulate in New York. We had an event in New York. Now, my friends are here in the Chinese embassy in D.C., so a good friend of mine said, "Just call up so-and-so and so-and-so." So being a new American that I was at the time, I picked up the phone and called this guy in New York. And you know what he said to me? I did the same spiel. "I'm Dottie Lee, so-and-so asked me to give you a call." We're in America. He's a diplomat. He should know better. And he gives me this. Well, I couldn't see him through the phone line, but he gives me one of those, okay? No, Dottie. You don't do that. Because he saw me still as a Chinese. That I shouldn't be doing the American way. I shouldn't be using so-and-so said I'm calling you. We have to use the intermediary. So what I should have done in my early career, now I teach people how to do that, was to get my friend to call him first, and then I'll follow up. But hey, I was, being a savvy young American, I was doing my thing. And so even with that, even with him being a diplomat, you still have to remember where he's coming from. And of course, your Chinese partners, what they're used to and where their comfort level is. So you can't just pick up the phone call and make one of those cold calls that we do sometimes. Quick meetings. Oh, there's an issue. Let's meet and let's chat about the challenges and hurdles that we need to get over. The Chinese have this thing about long courting process. It takes them forever. Well, you know what they say? The Chinese has only 5,000 years of civilization, right? So what's 2 years to them? All right, the next page. Also, we differ in negotiation styles and process. One of them is the means of persuasion. Americans like to be, we tend to be more aggressive. Do you agree? Okay. In the rest of the world, the eyes of the world, they see Americans as the more aggressive ones. Okay. We all agree on that. The Chinese, they're not very aggressive at all. I'm one of the rare ones. I will admit I'm very assertive. I can be aggressive. I was a reporter. Reporters would do whatever it takes to get your story done by deadline. That's how I was trained. So don't look at me as, oh, she's good. She's not like that. The Chinese like to question. They question and enduring again. By comparison, Americans are impatient. We want to get the bottom, from A to Z. We want to go through that whole process in less than 24 hours, maybe even sooner. When it comes to information exchange, Americans have the full authority. The Chinese only have limited authority because then you're only toting the party line, the company line. So when you deal with the individual at any given company, corporation, or even a government agency, keep in mind that person, your counterpart, may or may not have that full authority as you would. You represent your company as you move forward. We tend to be direct, and the Chinese are indirect. As I said, it's going roundabout and beating around the bushes, and takes forever to give you some kind of answer if you finally get an answer. Trusting. Chinese, once you have a foreign face, I hate to say, you have a foreign face, you have a foreign name, you don't speak Chinese or you don't speak much Chinese, you're in the category of the first being distrusted and suspicion. In the first, well, before they know you, why would they trust you, right? Before you could be trusted, you're in that category in the outset. Americans like to propose first. Here, I like to sell you something. I like you to use my service of designing. And look at the Chinese architecture industry in the last 5 years. All the fancy buildings are going up. Perhaps the best and biggest airport in Beijing, in the world, is in Beijing. You've flown in there a few times. And so they propose something, but the Chinese like to explain first. Seems to be an open book. We're very open. Americans, when we go somewhere, we do business, people can read us very clearly. We're an open book, pretty much. Do we hide? We can't hide. We're just very open. We just go from here to there, and they know our strategy. Well, the Chinese are seen. They're called the inscrutable Chinese. You can't read their face. You just don't understand what they're thinking, and we're taught not to show our feelings. Right? Okay. And you're laughing, you're smiling. Mm-hmm. And Susan, you're too. Of course, we can't show people. That's the game. You got to put on a game face, all right? Agreement. So by the time you haggle back and forth, you spend like a few months in China, eventually you get to the agreement. All right. Americans want to forge a good deal. The Chinese forging a long-term relationship. See, those are the fundamental differences. Now, with all that said, you have to understand where the Chinese came from. The 2,500 years of Confucianism teaching. It's really the principles and governing etiquette of the Chinese education, the foundation. It's a homogeneous society with very little tolerance, I alluded to earlier, for anything that deviates from accepted norms of behavior. So you're different, and you're distrusted. People don't believe you. I don't want to do business with you. Revering authority, that's another thing. The yin and yang, the Taoism of the culture, so always trying to find a way. Comprised through the ritual back and forth of haggling. Just keep that in the back of your head. That's what you have to deal with when it comes to the Chinese partners. 面子, that's face, what we say face, literally face, saving face. Now, this is at the core of the Chinese culture. What people do, what they say is all about saving each other's face. Notice I didn't say save your own face. It's about saving your face and the other person's face, including your partners, even your enemies. So if you're doing something or saying something that doesn't save your partner's face, now you lost face already. So keep that in mind. It's about maintaining the harmony. I know I'm repeating myself a few times. Just keep that in the back of your head. It's about maintaining that harmony. So it defines your social network, the most important measure of social worth. Okay, I'm gonna skip some so you could read. It's about a person's wealth, intelligence, attractiveness, position, skills, and 关系. 关系 we're gonna jump ahead and talk about in just a little bit. And next page. So 关系, loosely translated as personal connections, but it has much, much more than that. It's a fundamental and complex concept. It's about your social capital within the society of friends and relatives, close associates. Also, it's a reciprocal obligation. Say, I have a long-term friend who I went to school with from kindergarten. So he comes to the United States, and he actually did last week with the governor of Anhui, my home province, to visit the state of Maryland, which is the sister state of Anhui province, my province. So my friend comes to the U.S., he needs help, I have to help him, no matter what, okay? So that's the 关系. And he calls me up one day, he said, who's that friend that went to high school with you? Now he's a teacher at a very famous school, that I need to get in touch with her. So I asked him this time, I said, did you get in touch? I thought he was going to help his own child to get into that famous school. He said, oh no, it's another friend. He was helping another friend. Now he's doing guanxi with another friend of his, using the guanxi he has with me through another person. I mean, this is not even the most complicated guanxi example that I'm setting it up for you. It's not about him or me, it's about somebody else. And I'm not even in the picture by the time this transaction takes place. Okay? Guanxi is extremely important and intricate. And I mentioned here, it's often done through the back door, and it's only the only effective way to get certain things accomplished in China. So if you don't have guanxi, you can't really do much. You can't move 3 steps in China if you wanted to do any business. Next page. So that takes me to the next stage. Once you have guanxi, you got to use this thing we call 中间人, which is intermediary. Again, business deals in China don't have a chance, let me repeat, without a 中间人, the intermediary. So you got to use somebody to guide you through the line so you don't step on anything, intentionally or unintentionally, okay? Oftentimes people think, oh, I'm doing just fine, but you don't know when you may have offended your partners. Trust must be transmitted through guanxi. If you don't have guanxi, like that cold call I made to New York, only to New York, even with a friend, he didn't trust me. He gave me one of those, remember? All right. So even so, you got to build the trust through guanxi. All right. Again, let me stress the importance of the intermediary. Indispensable, even after the initial meeting. Sometimes I've seen American business going to China. After that first person takes them into China, they got the partnership going. You think, oh, don't need her anymore. Don't need him anymore. No, you still need it, because you can't function without that intermediary trying to explain and interpret various intricacies and not just language gaps, facial expression, body language, etc. 社会等级, that's the next one we're going to talk about. Very important, social status. Well, here we have social status, but it's not the same as what they have in China. Confucian values of obedience and deference to one's superiors. Again, it goes back to that nail that sticks out, and to maintain the harmony of the society, of the group, of the company, of the department, even in the mini level. Formality is deeply rooted in culture. It has to be formal. It's Mr. So-and-so, is Director John and President who and all that. American style of casualness does not play well. I think I give you that good example of a slap in the back. Equals a negotiation and signature. Let me give you a quick example. The Chinese pay so much attention to being, to having the right titles and so on and so forth. I once took an American corporation to China to sign a MOU. It was not even a contract. It was just a simple MOU. Now the Chinese side is the president of the company. Was not happy when he saw the draft of the MOU, which had a person's title less than a president. So he didn't like that at all. So we had to haggle over that back and forth. Almost cost the whole MOU. With me being in the middle, I'm trying to explain to him, Mr. Joe, this is not the same. The guy is always the one who signs the contract, signed the MOU for his multi-billion-dollar company. This is a public company. And he said, well, that's not good enough. I have the title of the CEO and the president. That guy is only the development officer. But the guy actually is the legal person to sign for this multi-billion-dollar public company. But Mr. Joe didn't think much of that. All he cared was the equal. So we were able to manage that, to change a different person just to keep him happy. And we didn't want to break the deal of signing a very important MOU. So next page. Reciprocity, very important. The Chinese do this a lot. Like I helped my friend by making this phone call to my high school friend who now is at a famous high school, I guarantee you there's some kind of gift exchange and some kind of thank you to express their appreciation. So once you have that, you change gifts, you thank people for what they've done for you, or you thank people for they are about to do something for you. So you give gifts beforehand. Now be careful with receiving gifts without any warning. Some people may want to come to you just to bring you a gift. Be very careful because you don't know what that gift is for. If you're receiving it, you have to be prepared to give something back, as in they ask you to do a favor. Are you with me so far? It sounds very manipulative, but that's what they're doing. All right? See, unsolicited favors, they come to you bearing gifts, and you have to be prepared to do something for them. All right? I see a few smiling faces and nodding heads. Don't accept gifts or favors unless you're prepared to reciprocate. Try not to put a Chinese in a position of not being able to return a favor. If you bring a very expensive Tiffany jewelry, a piece or something to somebody, and you know the value, you know they can't return, and don't do that. Don't put your Chinese partner in a position of not being able to return your favor. Privacy. Now, this word is very difficult to translate into Chinese. We don't really have a concept of privacy. We can't even translate it in one word or two words or maybe three words. Okay? Yeah. So the notion doesn't exist in the same way that among most Chinese. The prying eyes are everywhere in China. Local Chinese are being watched, so are the foreigners. Do you think you live in a private apartment or in a hotel, but you're being watched? So be aware of your behavior. Not that you're going to cause harm or do something illegal. Just be aware that you're being watched everywhere. We are taught to keep our feelings from showing on their faces, so we're very private in that regard, but there's no such word as privacy. Gift giving. Let's just do a quick do's and don'ts. Some of the do's and don'ts, do give some art objects. Last week, my home governor came to visit Maryland governor, and they exchanged gifts, official gifts, as well as personal gifts. What the Maryland governor gave my home governor was a pewter, Salisbury pewter. That's very famous. It's a Maryland product, and it's a fine product. So that's what our governor gave to my home province governor. So something useful, giveaways with logos. If you have a company giveaway, I've seen a lot of giveaways here, including this pen right here, the Ronald Reagan building. But do not give clocks, umbrellas, green hats, and other things that have excessive value. Let me give you a quick example on the umbrellas. You wonder, why umbrellas? About 2 years ago, I took the Chinese ambassador. He retired last year, went back to China. I took the Chinese ambassador to Louisville, Kentucky to visit a client of mine. So we were on this private jet, and we got there. We did everything. The governor of Kentucky received us, luncheon, and we visited the corporation, and then we went to the local newspaper to give an editorial briefing. So the governor was on, the ambassador was on record talking to the newspaper editorial staff, yada, 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 everything was good. So at the end, the editorial folks gave the ambassador and his wife some logoed of that newspaper umbrellas. Now, I had written memo to my client, the corporation, everybody got the memo, do not give these things. So the communications person of my client, the big corporation, looked at me and I looked at her. Our face were just, washed out, no blood left. And no blood left. We were just drained. It was a horrifying moment. And the newspaper people, of course, have no clue. And the ambassador and his staff were not happy. You could just look at his face. Umbrella is a bad sign. The sound of giving the umbrella, san, which means breaking up. So you want that relationship to break up, give your umbrellas. All right. So presenting gifts with both hands is a sign of courtesy. You may have gone through some simple Chinese training classes where you present your business card facing up to your counterpart and going like this with a slight bow and all that. I could teach you all that, and certainly I welcome you to get me back for your 3-hour training or 3 days training, what have you. But just keep in mind there are profound cultural differences between the Western world and the Chinese culture and society. And the next page is, of course, drive your message home effectively by respecting your know-hows, including your homework, speak to learn a little bit Chinese. You know where to take Chinese lessons, right? From the voice of the Rosetta Stones and Mandarin products. Okay, just a little plug there. Leave your bias and judgment behind. Whatever you have about that company, that culture group, that whatever Chinese, leave that behind and cultivate your guanxi, the number one important thing for you to do before you even go to China, and develop friendship, learn Chinese customs. With that, I thank you so much for your attention, and I will take questions afterwards. Thank you.